that you've got effective mechanisms to both develop individuals and then support the people who are doing the developing. In other words, support the line managers with the right tools so they can make sure that the guys who are defined as talent at all levels are progressing as quickly as possible through organisations. I wanted to give you something called an ACE. Was it? Can't quite read it. It's basically obviously a case study. All right. A case study from on a talent management initiative that a global oil company needs to do, and I won't mention the name, but there's not that many, so I'm sure if I let it slip. Right. So what are the challenges that this particular organisation had? Why did they actually say, right, we need to focus on talent management? There were 5 or 6 key drivers for them. One is the point I've already mentioned, which is about talent demographics, that they didn't have a clear strategy for developing people internally versus a reliance on the external marketplace. And they'd begun to realise that a reliance on the external marketplace wasn't something that was going to be sustainable in the long term. And for me, based in Qatar, the number of conversations I've had on that particular topic in the last 6 months, where it's a daily conversation, and I know it's true throughout the GCC and the wider Middle East, that there's 3 aspects to getting this right. One is making sure we give people the right technical skills. One is giving people second is giving people the right behavioural skills, so the right communication, engagement, motivational skills. And critically, making sure that people have the right aptitude. So, do they have the right application to want to work? So in some countries, and Qatar is a great example, where there's considerable wealth, people may have the right technical skills, but if they don't want to work, then we've got considerable challenges. So when you're looking at talent, you need to look at that triangle of 3 things. Back to this case study, the second issue that the organisation was really concerned about was diversity. And I thought we had a great presentation a little bit earlier on that particular point, making sure that you're creating a workforce environment where the range of employees or potential employees can be successful. Third point I've touched on already is talent mobility, making sure you're giving the people the right experiences in different cultures to be effective in your organisations in the future. The fourth is they were very concerned about how loose and unaligned their overall processes were, not just within talent management but broader HR. They had concerns that they were losing people, and they were also concerned that even if they got all of those things right, the talent that they'd identified weren't progressing quickly enough through the organisation. They thought there were some quick wins there to get people experienced more quickly and get them into the critical roles more quickly. So, this is a bit classic consulting, but these are the things that they went through, and this is really intended to try and bring it to life a little bit for you. They spent a lot of time understanding where they were. You can't plan for the future unless you know what your starting point is, so they spent a lot of time on that. They also spent a lot of time on getting the definitions right. So they clarified what they meant by talent. They clarified what would happen if someone was defined as talent and then didn't perform over a period of time. Would they then be defined as not talent? Well, the blunt answer was yeah, that's what happened. You don't sort of get into a club and then stay there forever. There's a real focus on your performance, so you could actually move in and move out of that talent group. They did a lot of measurement and comparison against other organisations to see where they stood, not just in terms of narrow definitions of talent, but broader processes linked to talent. So, for example, on recruitment, they looked at how long it took them to recruit versus their competitors, because they realised that if their recruitment processes were really ineffective, and they were taking 4 months to bring someone in and their competition was taking 2, they were in real danger of losing people to the competition. So they actually looked at some pretty broad external metrics. They also took a lot of qualitative measurement internally. So back to the very first point I made around millennials, they've invested a lot of time seeking to understand what it is that the future talent wants from an organisation. Money's obviously important, but actually experiences, and as I've said 2 or 3 times, the emphasis on what the organisation stands for came up time and time again. And then they reviewed the whole lot, as you'd expect, and they implemented new processes, etc. But what I'm trying to do is to try and give you a little bit of structure for how they actually looked at it. I put this in because as a just in case. I'm sure all of you have seen 9-box performance and potential grids before. If you haven't, obviously many organisations are using this sort of thing to actually assess how someone is defined as talent. They look at an individual's performance in a given period, normally a year, and then look at their longer term potential. I wanted to put this in as a reference point, so if you haven't got something like this, then you can take it away and use it. Obviously the ones in the top right hand corner who are performing well and have loads of potential are the ones who are perceived to be the talent and leadership of the future. So again, I wanted to go back to questions now, just to ask you some questions, and I think from the presentation that we heard a little bit earlier on, the answer to some of these questions is yes. I'm guessing that the answer to some of them is also going to be no as well. But do you have a clearly held definition for what you mean by talent, and is it consistent across the organisations? I would argue it needs to be consistent to be effective, because potentially you're going to want people to move around to get the right experiences so they can be successful leaders in the future. Have you defined the entry-level requirements, and then have you defined the requirements of what it means to stay in that definition, that defined talent pool? Have you thought about how transparent you are? I think this is a really difficult one, and I think culturally as well, if we sort of bring this back to the Middle East specifically, I think is even more challenging. I think many organisations outside of the Middle East have implemented talent management programs and been pretty transparent about who's in and who's out. So they've had events that are focused on top talent, etc. So individuals will know, and it's almost a badge of pride to say I'm in that particular program, which is linked to being recognised as high talent. My view, again, for discussion, would be as we sort of step towards getting more clarity on what we mean by top talent, I think we need to be quite cautious in how transparent we are. I think there's huge risks in alienating the population who are still really important to our organisation, but sit just outside that top definition of talent. And last question is, have you identified your overall talent cycle? Do you understand how your different programs fit together, not just within the area of talent, but how that links to recruitment, etc. So again, having given you questions, I then want to go into, right, what's the sort of process you need to go through to start to answer those questions? I don't want to just leave you with questions, although hopefully I'll leave you with some. So 8 things I think you need to go through when you're looking at your overall talent strategy. The first is on your business strategy. Again, I can't emphasise enough this important point about making sure. I'll give you a copy if you want. I can't emphasise enough this important point about making sure you've got a clear business vision that you can communicate, not just to your graduates and your millennials coming in, but your wider employee proposition.